Mrs. Vance, your son's DNA profile matches neither you nor your late husband. In fact, he is biologically related to an inmate currently in the state offender database. The transplant coordinator, Dr. Aris, pushed the white paper folder across the cold glass desk. Her hands were visibly shaking. I was 58 years old. My left kidney was failing, and my only surviving son, David, 34, had stepped up without hesitation to be my living donor. "That's impossible," I whispered, my mouth bone dry. "I delivered David at St. Jude's maternity ward on November 4th, 1992. I held him 30 seconds after he was born." "Take a look at line 4, Dr. Aris said softly, her eyes filled with deep, heavy pity. "Subject, David Vance, donor candidate. Maternal match, 0.00%. Paternal match, 0.00%. CODIS database hit 99.8% match to inmate 41902, Victor Vance, deceased 2008. My chest collapsed. Victor Vance was my late husband's estranged elder brother, a man who had been convicted of 3 violent home invasions 30 years ago and died in state prison. If you want to hear more raw emotional confessions from people who survived their family's deepest betrayals, take just 5 seconds to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep telling these true stories. Before I could swallow the bile rising in my throat, my phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from David, who was waiting in the hospital lobby down the hall. "Mom, the nurse just asked me to step into room 302 for an urgent secondary screening. What's going on? Did the blood match fail?" My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I looked up at Dr. Aris, my hands clutching my coat. "Does David know?" "Not yet," Dr. Aris whispered, "but the legal office has already flagged the file. By state law, when a non-paternity or non-maternal swap is identified in an organ donor match, we are required to notify the county prosecutor's cold case unit." I stumbled out of the office into the rain-slicked parking lot, unable to face my son. I drove straight through a blinding autumn thunderstorm toward the abandoned county clerk archive building downtown, the place where the 1992 hospital records were stored in steel vaults. I had to know the truth before the police knocked on my door, because 34 years ago, on the night David was born, I saw a nurse hand my baby to a stranger in the hallway, and I said nothing because I was too terrified to lose him. The county records basement was freezing, smelling of damp paper and old cardboard. I handed the retired archivist my hospital discharge papers from 1992. My fingers were so cold I could barely hold the yellowed sheet. "St. Jude's closed down in 1998, ma'am," the archivist said, pulling down a heavy, dust-covered binder labeled Maternity Delivery Ledger, Nov. 1992. He opened the thick leather book onto the wooden viewing desk. I ran my indexed finger down the faded handwritten entries for November 4th, 1992. 02:14 a.m. Martha Vance, male, 7 pounds 4 ounces, Dr. Julian. 02:22 a.m. Brenda Vance, male, 6 pounds 11 ounces, Dr. Julian. I stopped. My breath hitched in my throat. Brenda Vance, my late husband's sister-in-law, Victor Vance's wife. Right under Brenda's name was a handwritten note scribbled in smeared red ink, initialed by a head nurse named Clara. Alert. Child B, Brenda Vance, placed in Nursery Bay 4 by Victor Vance. Tag switched per verbal agreement. Do not alter master log. A cold sweat broke across my forehead. Victor Vance hadn't just terrorized our county through home invasions. In 1992, he was working as the night maintenance supervisor at St. Jude's maternity ward. He had intentionally switched his newborn son with mine 34 years ago. Suddenly, my cell phone chimed in my purse. It was a photo text from an unknown number. The image showed the front porch of my house. Sitting right on my welcome mat was a wet, rusted steel toolbox wrapped in heavy chains. A text message followed 2 seconds later. "David found the red box under the porch, Martha. He opened it. You have 20 minutes to get home before he calls the sheriff." I tore through the thunderstorm, my windshield wipers slapping violently against the glass. When I pulled into my gravel driveway, David's pickup truck was parked near the porch, its headlights glaring through the heavy rain. David was standing on the porch, drenched in rain, holding an open steel box in his hands. He was staring at the contents with a hollow, lifeless expression I had never seen on his face before. "David!" I screamed, running up the steps, grabbing his wet arm. "David, please, step inside. Let me explain." David didn't move. He didn't look at me. He held up a faded, blood-stained baby blanket and a laminated hospital wristband from 1992. The wristband read, "Baby Boy Vance, Mother, Brenda Vance." "The hospital called me 30 minutes ago, Mom," David said, his voice dropping to a terrifying, quiet whisper. "They told me the donor match was canceled. They told me my blood doesn't match yours." "David, listen to me," I sobbed, tears streaming down my face. "You are my son. I raised you. I walked you to school every single day." "Whose blanket is this, Mom?" David shouted, his voice cracking with immense emotional pain. "Why was this steel box buried under our porch steps with my dad's handwriting on the seal?" My jaw dropped. "Your dad's handwriting?" David reached into the steel box and pulled out an unread letter written on blue legal paper, signed by my late husband, Arthur Vance, dated June 12, 2010, the year before Arthur died of cancer. David read the first sentence aloud, his hands shaking so hard the paper rattled. "To whoever finds this box, if you are reading this, my brother Victor's threat has finally come to an end, but my son David must never know that he is living on land bought with blood money." I grabbed the porch railing to keep from falling. My late husband, Arthur, had known. For 34 years, the man I slept beside every night had known that David was not my biological child. "Read the rest of it, David," I whispered, my heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. David turned the page, his eyes scanning the faded cursive writing. "Victor threatened to destroy our family in 1992, the letter continued. He told me that if I ever tried to swap the babies back, he would tell the police that Martha was the one who paid Nurse Clara to execute the trade. To keep Martha out of prison, I signed over my half of the family farm to Victor's trust fund in Chicago. But Victor didn't keep his end of the deal. He kept Martha's real biological son." David stopped reading. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with absolute horror. "My real brother?" David whispered, his breath catching. "Where is he, Mom? Where is your biological son?" "I don't know," I cried out, grabbing David's hands. "I swear to God, David, I didn't know Arthur made a deal with Victor. I thought you were mine." Suddenly, a pair of bright, high-beam headlights flashed at the end of my gravel driveway. A sleek black sedan pulled up behind David's truck. A tall man in a dark trench coat stepped out into the pouring rain, holding a thick leather briefcase. He walked up my porch steps with calm, measured clicks of his boots. He had sharp, familiar blue eyes and a scar running along his left jawline. When I looked at his face in the porch light, my blood ran completely cold.
"Good evening, Martha," the stranger said, his voice deep, gravelly, and steady. "Who are you?" David demanded, stepping between the man and me, his fist clenching around the steel box handle. "Get off our property!" The man set his briefcase down on the porch table, popped the chrome latches, and pulled out a certified probate file from Cook County, Illinois. "My name is Thomas," the man said, looking directly into my eyes. "And 48 hours ago, I received a court summons regarding the estate of Victor Vance." My voice trapped itself in my throat. "Thomas?" "Thomas," the man said quietly. "I am your biological son, Martha." A tear rolled down his cheek, mixing with the rain on his face. "Victor raised me in Chicago until I was 16. He told me my mother abandoned me on a doorstep in 1992. I spent my entire adult life believing I was the son of a convicted felon." David backed away against the house wall, his chest heaving as he looked between Thomas and me. The resemblance was indisputable. Thomas had Arthur's jawline, my mother's blue eyes, and the exact slight slouch in his shoulders that Arthur had. "Why are you here now, Thomas?" I sobbed, taking a hesitant step toward him, my hand reaching out toward my lost child. "Why now?" Thomas pulled a single sheet of paper from his briefcase and handed it to me. "Notice of eviction and asset recovery. Property, 412 Maple Ridge Road, Vance Estate. Claimant, Thomas Vance, sole beneficiary of Victor Vance Trust. Grounds, fraudulent transfer of deed, 1992 agreement." "I didn't come here for a happy family reunion, Thomas," the man said, his tone turning ice cold. "Victor's estate attorneys filed a claim on this property yesterday. In 12 hours, this house and land will be auctioned off by the county sheriff to pay for Victor's unpaid Chicago legal debts." "Auctioned off?" David yelled, stepping forward, his face red with fury. "My father paid off this mortgage 20 years ago. You can't take our home." "Your father didn't pay it off, David," Thomas said, pulling out a second document bearing a red notary seal. "Arthur signed a secret second mortgage with Victor in 2005. Victor used this land as collateral for a $200,000 bail bond in Chicago. When Victor skipped bail, the bond defaulted. The lien has been accumulating interest for 19 years. The total amount listed at the bottom of the page made my vision go black. $684,200. "My husband would never do that," I screamed against the howling wind. "Arthur loved this land." "He did it to protect you, Mom," David said softly, his voice trembling as he looked down at Arthur's blue legal letter in his hands. "Look at page 3. Dad didn't sign the bond to help Victor. Victor forged my signature on a power of attorney form from 1992. Thomas froze. His sharp blue eyes darted to the blue legal letter in David's hands. "What power of attorney form?" Thomas asked, his voice losing its cold edge for the first time. "Page 3, David said, handing the letter to Thomas. "Read what Victor did to your father." Thomas took the letter, his brow furrowing as he read Arthur's final confession under the porch light. "Victor forged my signature on the Illinois trust deed while I was in the hospital having spinal surgery in 2005. I couldn't report him to the state police because Victor threatened to send a tape of Nurse Clara's confession to the prosecutor, which would put Martha in prison as an accomplice.
I spent my entire adult life paying off Victor's blackmail fees every month. Thomas's hands began to shake. The cold, vengeful mask he had worn since stepping off his car began to crumble. "The Nurse Clara's tape?" Thomas whispered, reaching into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small, yellowed microcassette labeled St. Jude, November 4th, 1992.
"Where did you get that tape, Thomas?" I asked, my voice barely audible above the storm. "I found it in Victor's safety deposit box in Chicago after he died," Thomas said, his voice cracking. "I never played it. I was too afraid of what I would hear." David walked over to his pickup truck, pulled an old cassette player from his tool rack, and set it on the porch table. Thomas stepped forward, his fingers trembling as he slid the microcassette into the deck and pressed play. The tape hissed with heavy background static. Then a sharp, nervous female voice filled the porch, Nurse Clara. "Victor, stop holding the baby like that. You're going to hurt him." Then came Victor's harsh, grating voice. "Shut up, Clara. Put Arthur's kid in Brenda's bassinet. If Martha or Arthur ever find out, I'll tell the police you took $10,000 from me to swap them. Martha was asleep under anesthesia. She didn't sign anything, but I'll make sure she takes the fall if this ever comes out." The recording ended with a loud slam of a hospital door. Silence fell over the porch. The only sound left was the rain drumming against the tin roof. Thomas fell back into the porch chair, burying his face in his hands, weeping uncontrollably. 34 years of believing his biological mother had abandoned him. 34 years of carrying the shame of a criminal father. It was all a lie manufactured by Victor Vance. I walked over to Thomas, knelt down on the wet porch floorboards beside his chair, and wrapped my arms around his shoulders. "I never gave you away, Thomas," I sobbed, pulling my biological son tight against my chest. "I was robbed of you." Thomas buried his head in my neck, crying like the newborn baby he had been 34 years ago. David knelt down on the other side of the chair, putting his hand on Thomas's shoulder, tears streaming down his face as well. "We are going to fight this together," David whispered. 3 days later, we stood inside the main courtroom of the county circuit court. The room was filled with local reporters, county officials, and investigators from the state attorney's office. Sitting at the defense table was the corporate attorney representing Victor Vance's Chicago Trust Fund, a man who had spent 10 years trying to foreclose on our family estate. The judge, an elderly woman named Judge Catherine Vance, no relation, slammed her gavel down onto the wooden block. "The court has reviewed the 1992 delivery logs, the certified forensic handwriting analysis of the 2005 bail bond, and the audio confession of Nurse Clara," Judge Catherine announced, her voice echoing off the high mahogany walls. She turned her sharp gaze toward the Chicago trust attorney. "Mr. Sterling," the judge said sternly, "this court finds that the 2005 lien against the Vance property was executed through egregious forgery, extortion, and criminal fraud perpetrated by Victor Vance." The attorney stood up nervously, clutching his papers. "My clients in Chicago are legitimate creditors who—" "Your clients in Chicago operated a fraudulent shell trust designed to exploit a victim of human trafficking and baby swapping," Judge Catherine barked, slamming her gavel down again. "The lien against 412 Maple Ridge Road is hereby declared void ab initio. The property title is fully restored to Martha Vance." The courtroom erupted in quiet gasps. "Furthermore," the judge continued, looking toward Thomas and David, who were sitting side by side behind my bench, "the county prosecutor's office has officially cleared Martha Vance of all alleged wrongdoing in the 1992 hospital incident. The criminal record of Victor Vance is sealed permanently." I let out a long, shuddering breath, feeling 34 years of suffocating guilt melt off my chest. 6 months later, the spring sun shone brightly over the rolling green hills of our 3-acre farm. The old gravel driveway had been newly graded.
On the front porch, 2 wooden rocking chairs sat side by side near the warm, welcoming red front door. Inside the hospital's surgical wing downtown, a groundbreaking cross-match protocol was executed. While David couldn't be my direct kidney donor due to our lack of biological match, Thomas stepped up without a second thought. The pre-surgery genetic panel confirmed a perfect 9 out of 10 match between Thomas and me. The surgery was a complete success. Yesterday afternoon, I sat on my front porch in the warm May sunshine holding a hot cup of tea. David walked out to the porch carrying a plate of fresh blueberry muffins he had baked, while Thomas followed behind him holding a set of garden shears pointing toward the overgrown rose bushes by the fence. "I told you we need to trim those back before June, Thomas," David teased, laughing as he handed me a muffin. "I'm an engineer, David, not a gardener," Thomas smiled back, sitting on the porch steps beside his brother. They weren't raised together, and they bore the scars of a terrifying past, but over the last 6 months, they had forged a bond stronger than any bloodline lie could ever break. I lost 34 years of raising my biological son, and I carried the weight of a dark secret that nearly destroyed my life. But as I look at my 2 boys sitting together on the porch steps, laughing under the clear blue sky, I realize I didn't lose my family. I gained 2 sons. And for the very first time in 58 years, I am finally, truly at peace.